A little bit about me. I wear an academic hat, so for the past 20 years, I've been researching AI. My undergraduate, my master's, PhD, postdocs are all in AI. I'm now entrepreneur in residence for UCL, which is one of the world's leading universities in AI, and I help them take deep technology and turn it into innovations. I'm also the CEO of a company called Satalia, which builds AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world, and we were acquired by WPP, the biggest media marketing agency in the world, about 18 months ago, where I'm Chief AI Officer. Okay, before we talk about AI, I want to talk about intelligence. I'm going to ask you lots of questions. I hope that you save up lots of questions for me as well. I want to take you through this technology stack. This is how I think about building data-driven decision-making systems. And the first question I want to ask you all is, what is data? Does anybody know the definition of data? Data comes from the Latin word datum, which means given things. It's stuff. It's the fabric of our universe. It's ones and zeros, bits and bytes. It's a sound that's going into your ears. It's a light that's going into your eyes. It's not until you give something context does it become information. So if I say to you 210280, this is data. If I say that it's a date of birth or how much money I have in my account, then it becomes information. Information is data in context. Let's get you warmed up. What does this probably say? I know you can do this. Don't be shy. A, B, C. What does this probably say? 12, 13, 14. But you can see that the data that's going into your eyes is the same data, but you're giving it a different meaning based on its context. I don't know how well this will translate, but I want you to read this and create an image in your mind of what you think is happening here. So read this sentence, create a picture in your head of what you think is going on. Maybe most of you are thinking of a guy, John, reading a letter out loud to a lady called Mary. Actually, this data can be interpreted in many ways. John could be reading a letter that was addressed to Mary or sent to Mary. John could be reading the alphabet, A, B, C, D, to Mary. John could be reading the letter of the law to Mary. John could be reading a book called The Letter to Mary. John could be reading a book called The Letter to a Lady Called Mary. It could be an instruction. John, read the letter to Mary. You will all go away with a picture in your mind of what you think is correct, and you're probably wrong. And my goal today is to convince you all that humans are rubbish. That's my goal today. Okay. Imagine if I give you a spreadsheet, and in the spreadsheet it has 3 columns. It has a column which is the date, a column which is the temperature on that date, and a column which is the number of ice creams that I sold on that date. So we have date, temperature, ice cream sales. What would we do with that information? We'll probably look for some sort of correlation. Maybe we'll draw a graph. So along the x-axis, I have increase in temperature. Along the y-axis, I have increase in ice cream sales. And if I plot that data, I'll see some sort of trend going upwards. The hotter it gets, the more ice creams we sell. This is called descriptive analytics. What we're doing is we're organizing information to try to know things about the world. Actually, Plato had a very good definition for knowledge. He said, knowledge is justified true belief. Knowledge isn't necessarily a fact, but based on our experience, based on statistics, we believe things about the world. Now, we can do something really cool now, which is what everybody's getting excited about. We can do a thing called predictive analytics, and we can align through it. So now you're all data scientists, and we can use this to now predict how many ice creams we need to manufacture. And we can use more and more sophisticated mathematics to get a better fit of that line to that data. And I would argue all we're trying to do in machine learning, in data science, is to fit some sort of line or plane or hyperplane to a data set to give us the best predictive power. That's all we're really trying to do. But knowing something is very different to understanding something. So why do we sell ice creams when it's hot outside? Why do we sell ice creams when it's hot outside? Well, in the UK, when it's hot outside, we all go outside because it's a scarce resource. We only see the sun for 2 weeks of the year. And then what happens is we get hot, and we can cool ourselves down in different ways. We can go back inside, we can take our clothes off, we can buy an ice cream. Why does an ice cream cool us down? Thermodynamics. To expect a computer to understand that narrative from that line is very difficult. We don't understand, computers don't understand about thermodynamics, they don't understand about human behavior. So it's very important that we bring domain experts, the people that understand the world, together with the data scientists to interpret the world correctly. Because your domain expert's going to say, Daniel, your model of the world here is wrong. It's dangerously wrong. Because if tomorrow is scorching hot, if it's the hottest day ever, your factory is going to manufacture lots of ice creams. But the reality is nobody's going to go outside, so you're not going to sell any ice creams. It's really important we bring together those two types of people. So I would argue that what we're trying to do is understand the world perfectly so that we can make good decisions. And it turns out that humans are terrible at making decisions, and I'm going to try to argue that now. There's a very good book by a world-leading economist called Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow. I'd highly recommend you read this book. Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He argues we have a fast brain and a slow brain. And I'm going to test those brains with you all now. I'm going to ask you some maths questions. Okay, and your job, I know it's early, your job is to answer those maths questions as fast as possible. If you don't answer them faster than your competitors, they're going to take your market. So speed is important. We're going to start out nice and easy, and we'll get more and more complicated. So don't be shy. The first question, what's 2 times 2? I know you can say fine. What's 14 times 16? Okay, so the point here is this one you didn't need to think about. This one, you have to go through a process, an algorithm, to come up with the right answer. Okay, I'm going to ask you a few more maths questions. Again, your job is to answer them very quickly. Start out nice and easy. The combined price of a bat and a ball is €1.10. The bat is €1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? Huh? Nearly? So if you're thinking 10 cents, it's not 10 cents. The bat is €1.05. The ball is 5 cents. The combined price is €1.10. You probably used your fast brain and you came up with the wrong answer. Let me give you another example. I don't know. Imagine these are staff members. I don't know. And what we want to do is we want to allocate these, ignore this, we want to allocate 5 staff members to 5 jobs. How many ways can I allocate 5 people to 5 jobs? So I'm looking at one allocation. I can flip 2 around to get another allocation. How many ways can I allocate 5 people to 5 jobs? Do you remember that exclamation mark we learned in school, factorial, 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times. So there's 120 possible ways to allocate 5 people to 5 jobs. Let's make the problem a bit more complicated. I've got 15 people. How many ways can I allocate 15 people to 15 jobs? Don't say 15 factorial. That's cheating. It's over 1 trillion possible ways. To expect a human to solve this problem, we're wasting our time. One rule to take away with you today, anything more than 7, don't use a human for. Okay? And actually, industry don't have problems of this size, they have problems of this size. So here are 500 staff members. How many ways can I allocate them to jobs? It's a big number. It's a number that's got over 1,000 digits. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Once you reach about 60 people in this room, you have more possible combinations than that there are atoms in the universe. Humans can solve problems up to 7. You can hire a good computer scientist that can solve problems up to 30 or 40. Beyond that, you need to have deep specialized expertise in algorithms. Let's just drum this problem home. So imagine you have your ice cream van, and your ice cream van wants to deliver ice creams around these 24 points around London. Humans are actually quite good at solving these problems. Maybe after a few minutes, we'll draw a nice path around those points. How long will it take a computer to get the shortest path? The one that's going to save the most amount of petrol and time? Anybody? Seconds, milliseconds? Somewhere between that and 20 billion years. If you put this number into your calculator, 24 factorial, you get this number of roots. If you had a computer that could check 1 million roots a second, 1 million roots every second, it would take 20 billion years, longer than the age of the universe, to check every single one and say, this one that I looked at 10 billion years ago, this one's the shortest one, you should do that. And if I had another point to the map, I now have 25 times 20 billion years, so 5,000 billion years. If I had another point to the map, you have 26 times 5,000 billion years. These are exponential problems. They get ugly very quickly. If you choose the wrong algorithm, it will take longer than the age of the universe to solve. If you choose the right algorithm, it will take milliseconds. That's the difference now in terms of benefit. So when I build systems for organizations, they usually have these 3 parts. Everybody's getting excited about data. You're all bringing your data together into data lakes. Then you're hiring data scientists, my students, to then find patterns and insights in that data. Now, I would controversially argue that if you extract more insights and give them to human beings to make decisions, you tend not to lead to better decisions. More insights tend not to lead to better decisions. I would argue what you need to do is solve this part first. Solve the decision-making part using algorithms, then figure out what insights do you need to be able to make better decisions. My worry is that companies are hiring these people to solve these problems. And actually, in Spain, there's still a very, very good pedigree around these types of skills. If you're old enough, they used to be called operations researchers, they're decision scientists, they're discrete mathematicians. Solve this problem first, and then work backwards. Anyway, if I give a system data, and it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give it the same data, it makes the same decision, what I have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. But does anybody know the definition of stupidity? What's the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. I would argue that by definition, automation is stupid. And I know that everybody that touches this technology stack calls themselves an AI company, but there are actually two definitions of AI. The first definition is getting computers to do things that humans can do. It's a popular definition. I would argue that it's weak. Humans can find patterns in about 4 dimensions, and we can solve problems up to 7. Computers can find patterns in thousands of dimensions, and they can solve problems with thousands of moving parts. So benchmarking machines against humans is a very silly thing to do. Obviously, over the past decade, we've managed to get machines to do things that traditionally only human beings can do. We can get machines to correspond in natural language, chatbots. We can get machines to recognize objects and images. And when we get machines to do things that humans can do, we then assume that that's intelligence. Now, there's a better definition of AI that comes from the definition of intelligence. It's this. So instead of using human beings as the definition, it's goal-directed adaptive behavior. So goal-directed in the sense we're trying to achieve an objective. We're trying to route our vehicles to maximize deliveries. We're trying to allocate our staff to maximize utilization. We're trying to put marketing down our channels to maximize reach. You have to have a goal. Behavior is how quickly can I achieve that goal. Now, we've just discovered if you choose the wrong decision-making algorithm, it will take longer than the age of the universe. If you choose the right one, it will take milliseconds. But the key word for me in this definition is adaptive. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so that next time you can make better decisions. And if I was being totally honest, I haven't seen really any adaptive systems in production. You tend not to see adaptive systems in production. So I would argue nobody's really doing AI to this definition. The true paradigm of AI are systems that are able to safely adapt themselves in production. A little bit of a history lesson. So this was AI in the 60s and 70s. This is one of my favorite paintings. It's Socrates before he drinks hemlock. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. So if I say to you, Socrates is a man, and all men are mortal, I can infer that Socrates is mortal. So AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of rules and trying to infer new knowledge, and it didn't really work. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along that's modeled on how brains work. This is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 18 years ago was trying to take the brain of a bumblebee. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle. And bumblebees can do amazing things. They navigate 3D worlds. They talk to each other. They solve problems. They don't handle windows very well, but they're very smart little creatures. And the question was, can you take the brain of a bumblebee and model it in a machine? 18 years ago, it was impossible. About 12 years ago, there was a new paradigm in this technology that now allows us to build brains that have hundreds, if not billions, of neurons. And we can teach these brains to do things that humans can do. ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, all of these technologies that you're currently seeing are using these types of brains to create that content. I would argue these brains are really good at finding patterns in data. They're really good at knowing things about the world. But then you want to use these technologies to then reason and make decisions, and then you want to build systems that can safely adapt themselves in production. Okay, those are the 3 elements of AI. Okay, actually, I've built an entire career around defining AI. And for the most part, everything that we do in industry is build very specific solutions to solve very specific problems. So instead of looking at AI through the lens of definitions, I now look at AI through the lens of its applications. Over the past 10 years, the combination of compute, data, new algorithms allow us to do now really interesting things in industry. And I think there are 6 categories of interesting things. So the first category is basic task automation. Now, the AI community will say this is not really AI, but the reality is that you can replace basic human tasks by very simple algorithms and free those people up to do more interesting things. Whilst these technologies are not sophisticated, you can have a massive impact on business if you apply the right algorithms to solving these problems. The second category is what a lot of excitement around is at the moment on the internet, which is content generation. So we can use these big brains to create images, text, video, and of course, these technologies are now being used by creatives to generate content in a much more quickly way. And of course, in WPP, we've been using these technologies for many, many years. The third category is the humanization or human representation of AI. So we can take a human being and we can replace that human being by something that looks and feels exactly like a human being. And by the way, each one of these 6 categories I'll talk about raise different ethical questions, social questions, security questions. So for example, if I am interfacing with something that looks like a human being, as a company, should I declare that that is not a human being? I have to declare that I'm a human being when I go to websites, that I'm not a bot. Should we have bots declaring that they are bots? The fourth category is what organizations are getting very excited about, which is machine learning, data science. We can use these technologies to extract complex insights from data, and they can now help us understand the world in new and exciting ways. Right? So they can help us understand about human behavior and all sorts of things. Now, I would argue that extracting insights from data doesn't always lead to better decisions. And so the fifth category is using these traditional technologies, operations research, discrete mathematics, to essentially make much better decisions. And again, I would argue we see the biggest application in organizations using these technologies and using these technologies. There's a lot of excitement here, there's a lot of excitement here, but we get the biggest win with these two. And the final category is augmenting your physical self with exoskeletons, cybernetics, both in the physical world and the digital world. So you can augment yourself with AI to help you ultimately make better decisions. So these are the 6 categories, and as I said, each one of these 6 categories raise different security, safety, ethical governance questions. And what I'm not seeing from government is enough understanding about these types of technologies. So actually, I want to just controversially argue that there's a lot of people calling themselves AI ethicists. I would argue that there's no such thing as AI ethics. So ethics is the study of right and wrong. And these technologies have no notion or understanding of right and wrong. Human beings have an intent. That intent might be to maximize the number of deliveries in my vehicles or maximize the utilization of my employees. They have an intent, they have a goal. And then they implement a technology to try to achieve that goal. Now, sometimes those technologies do very well. They overachieve their goal to cause other problems across parts of the organization, or they might not achieve their goal because they're not tested in the right way, which is like bias and things like that. And so I would argue that these technologies are not making ethical decisions. And where they get things wrong, it's a safety problem. It's not an ethical problem. It's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethical perspective. It's not the AI. Very happy to talk about that in the Q&A. I'm going to talk about innovation now. So this is a hierarchy. This is not a picture of my company, although most people do sell drugs to each other. That's quite common in my company. This hierarchies breed interesting relationships. And I would argue that these types of structures are not conducive for adaptation. They're not conducive for innovation. Remember, the more adaptive you are, the more intelligent you are. And so what we're seeing is organizations adopt new types of structures, new types of organizational methodologies, and the principle behind lean and scrum and agile and design thinking. The principle is, how can my organization adapt quickly to a changing world? Adaptation means intelligence. This is an entire different talk, but what we're seeing is obviously AI can be used to profile customers, understand how to increase your sales, reduce churn. AI can be used to reduce costs in your supply chain, make things more efficient. But I would argue, if you're not using AI to unlock the creative capacity of your workforce, you're dying from the inside. And organizations are realizing they want to move from these structured ways of working to much more fluid, adaptive ways of working. And actually, so I would argue that these technologies that I've just mentioned will be a commodity over the next 10 years. We already have access to very cheap compute. All of the tools you need to build big brains, it's all free, it's all open source. Somebody will commoditize decision making and somebody will commoditize self-learning. The battleground for organizations is not technology. The battleground is talent. How do you attract, retain, motivate talent, and enable that talent to use these technologies to innovate? Steve Jobs had a fantastic definition for innovation. He said, innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in that definition is the word that. That is generating ideas and getting to the point where somebody is willing to pay for them. And that process is long and hard and painful. The shorter we can make that process, the more quickly we can adapt to a changing world. And one of the key ingredients to innovation is motivation. There's a very good introductory book by Dan Pink on motivation. He said there are 3 things that motivate people: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is giving people the freedom to do what they want. Mastery, the ability to become really good at what they want. And purpose is giving something higher to align themselves with. So one of the first challenges that organizations have, particularly in AI, is how do they attract talent in the first place? A number of CEOs that I work with that have given millions of dollars to their CTO and say, go and build me an AI team. And they can't hire a single person because they're not sexy and they don't have interesting problems. If you're sexy and you've got interesting problems, you'll attract talent and they'll stay with you. If you're in the other 2 quadrants, you'll attract talent and they'll leave after a few years. And that can be more dangerous to your organization than not being able to attract talent at all. It's really important for organizations to be honest with themselves, because understanding where you are on this matrix will help you understand whether you build out your own team, whether you work with a third-party vendor, whether you buy technology off the shelf, whatever. But once you have engaged with talent, you then need to create an organizational structure that enables that talent to thrive. And over the past few decades, we've seen a flattening of organizations. We moved from these traditional organizations with layers of middle management to much more flat, lean type structures. And whilst I think that this is a step in the right direction, I would argue that this is still not optimal for innovation. My company was only about 120 people before it was acquired by WPP, but we've never had any managers, any fixed hierarchies. People have always been free to work where they want, how they want, on whatever they want. So the challenge is, how do you build an operating system for a company that enables the right structure to emerge according to the innovation that you're taking to a market? If you're a product, you want one structure. If you're a service, you want a different structure. And my goal is not just to scale this to 120,000 people in WPP. My goal is to scale this to a planet. I want to try and create a platform where everybody's free to work on what they want, where they want, how they want, and be fairly remunerated for that contribution. We'll talk more about that later. So the same types of technologies that we use to understand customers, to understand their behavior, to sell them more things, can be used also in your organization. Now, this might sound a bit creepy, but what we do in my company is we gather all of the data that people are generating, and we can then start to understand people's relationships, their skills, what they're good at, what they're not good at. We can understand if one of these 2 people leave, I create a silo. It does raise lots of interesting ethical questions. I can identify people who sell drugs to each other in my company. I can identify secret lovers. I can identify people who are going to leave the company before they know they're going to leave the company. So the intent here is not to have these insights to squeeze more out of my employees. The intent is to understand their hopes, their dreams, their desires, and to make sure that they're working on things that align with their values and the values of the company. The future of how organizations will operate is these liquid type structures. One of the crazy things that we used to do in my company a few years ago, we used to ask everybody to make public recommendations of their salary. So you will all publicly declare what you want to be paid, and people will then vote on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And the number of votes that you have is calculated by an AI. So if you've worked very closely with somebody, if you're very knowledgeable about their domain, you will have more votes for their salary than somebody else. So the future of organizations are creating these liquid democracies where you try to get the best group of people to make the decision. And that decision-making is not in some sort of fixed hierarchy. I believe that we can use this principle of liquid decision-making to not just salary setting, but to hiring, to firing, to forecasting, to strategy. Most organizations are going through their digital transformation. They're realizing that they need to get all of their data together to be able to then ask interesting questions of their data. But what organizations are ultimately trying to do is create a digital twin of themselves. I don't know if you've heard the term digital twin. A digital twin is a digital representation of the entire organization. So at the moment in your organization, I guess if marketing creates a campaign and thinks that that campaign will increase demand by 10%, you really have no idea whether you're going to be able to fulfill that promise to the customer. You don't know if your supplier is going to default on their supply. You don't know if you're going to have enough space in your warehouse. You don't know if you have enough staff to sell that stuff. So the challenge is that the supply chains are disconnected. The future of an organization is a digital simulation so you can predict what will happen across my supply chain so you can solve that problem before it exists. And actually, there are 3 digital twins. The first one is of your operations, the flow of goods through your supply chain. The second digital twin is your workforce. So you want to understand the characteristics of your workforce so that you can layer that on top of your organization. And the third digital twin is processes, boring processes like expenses and onboarding and offboarding. And I think that over the next 10 years, there's going to be a convergence of these 3 digital twins to allow organizations, again, to adapt very quickly to a changing world. Okay, let's talk about the future. I think this is probably what most people are excited about. So hopefully I've convinced you a little bit that there's still a lot of misunderstanding about AI and potentially a lot of misinvestment as well. But hopefully I've helped you realize that if you understand how to apply these technologies in the right way, you're going to be very successful. I don't know if you know who said this quote at the top. I don't know if anybody recognizes this quote. It's a bit controversial, sorry. The nation that leads in AI will be the rule of the world. This was Vladimir Putin recently. I think we need to acknowledge that these technologies are not only going to have the most profound impact on our businesses, but they're also going to have the most profound impact on society. And there's a number of concerns that people are now surfacing with respect to AI. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to capture these concerns using this framework. Okay, so some of you may have heard of the term singularity. Singularity comes from physics. It's a point in time and space that we can't see beyond. We just don't know what happens beyond that point. And the AI community have adopted the word singularity for this, which is the point in time where we build a brain 1 million times smarter than humanity. And we'll come back to this in a moment. But I think there are at least 6 singularities, and those of you that have done a business degree or written a business plan will have probably come across this framework called PESTLE. PESTLE is a macro analysis framework that stands for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. And I think there are at least 6 singularities that we need to be aware of. So the first singularity is when we no longer know what is true. So we know that these technologies have been used to cause political challenges. They've been deep fakes, Misinformation bots have challenged our political foundations. And we also know that these technologies over the past few years have accelerated in their power. We will reach a point where we cannot necessarily authenticate whether a piece of content that we are engaging with is true or not. And I don't know what happens when society distrusts all of the content that they're currently observing. So this is a big concern. I heard a few years ago a machine learning model, an AI, was trained on the voice of a CEO. And they used that AI to call the accounts department and got them to pay an invoice. And the accounts department thought they were talking to the CEO. Now, that technology is now a commodity. It's in all of your hands. So Microsoft launched a technology that with 3 seconds of somebody's voice, it can replicate their voice. With 3 seconds of their voice. So you all now could imitate every CEO on the planet using a technology that's essentially free. There's a very good BBC documentary that I would highly recommend everybody watch called The Capture, which talks to this issue. But there is a concern that there will reach a point where we cannot authenticate content. And I think that this industry needs to play a part in solving this problem. The second singularity is my favorite singularity. It is coined by a very good friend of mine called Callum Chase. The economic singularity is the point in time where we automate the majority of human labor. So this is obviously every day when you open a newspaper or look at LinkedIn, there are now concerns about the impact that AI has on jobs. And I think the reality is that nobody really knows what will happen after the next 10 years. Some people think that whilst these technologies are really good at removing friction, and friction usually means human labor. And my day job is making things more efficient. So removing humans to get them to do more interesting things, to reduce the cost of production. But the concern is if you can replace whole jobs, then you will. The pressure to reduce costs, to increase profits, to stay competitive means that if organizations can remove that labor, they probably will. And the concern is that over the next 10, 15 years, we might see mass technological unemployment. Lots and lots of people leave jobs, but our economy is not able to rebalance, which might lead to social unrest. This is the concern. Myself, Callum, other people think, controversially, that we should be accelerating innovation. Actually, if we can remove the friction from the creation and dissemination of goods, food, healthcare, education, shelter, all of those things, then we can bring the cost of those goods down to almost zero. This is the hypothesis, is that you can bring the cost of all of the goods that we depend on, all of the goods that we rely on, down to zero. Now, I'm not talking about taxing rich people and giving it to poor people. I'm talking about creating a world where everybody is born and they don't have to worry about paying for food. They don't have to worry about paying for energy because it's all free. I genuinely believe that this world is possible. Now, people say, Daniel, work defines who I am. What would I do if I didn't have a job? What would I do if I didn't work? And I don't have to work. I sold my company. I don't have to work for the next 10 lifetimes. And I know lots of people that don't have to work. They're not sitting at home bored and depressed. They're using their time and their assets to try and create a positive impact to humanity. And I bet if I asked each one of you, what would you do if you didn't have to work? You'll say, maybe I'll travel, look after my health more, spend more time with the children, indulge in my hobbies. But if I keep asking you, you'll say, I want to do things that better the lives of my community and the world. I think we all have an innate desire to try to contribute positively to humanity. And I want to try and create a world where more and more people are unlocked to do that. I think it's genuinely possible. The third singularity is the social singularity, often referred to as the Methuselarity. So sorry, translator, that's a difficult word. This is the point in time where we cure death. Now, there are scientists, eminent scientists, that believe there are people alive today that don't have to die. AI is not only advancing medicine, it's also able to clean out our arteries, and like a car, if we can stay on top of damage, then that car will never ever break down. And the same hypothesis applies to humans, is that we'll reach a point where we stay on top of damage and we don't have to die. And I don't know what the world would look like once people realize that people don't have to die. The fourth singularity is, again, something that's also very popular in the news, and you'll probably have seen an open letter 2 days ago, launched by the Future of Life Institute, which was signed by Elon Musk and myself and other AI experts. An open letter saying that we should pause for at least 6 months the creation of these big brains. Because the concern is that once these big brains reach human-level intelligence, they will be able to build brains smarter than themselves. And we don't know if it will take seconds, minutes, weeks, years, but at some point, they will build a superintelligence, a brain that is 1,000,000 times smarter than humans. It's often referred to as the singularity, and it's predicted that this will happen within our lifetime, and we have no idea if this is going to be the most glorious thing that happens to humanity or our biggest existential threat. And I am concerned that it might be our biggest existential threat, and I think that we should be preparing for this thing to come along. And we should be making sure that it doesn't see us as a threat. I don't know how to do that, but that would be my advice. The fifth singularity is where we create uncontrollable ecological collapse. And this is something that, of course, you're all familiar with. Now, consumption gets a bad reputation. I would argue that consumption is enabling more and more people to access goods and services that enrich their lives. And yes, there are people that consume too much, but for the most part, I think that the world is creating goods and services that are enriching people's lives. But we know that increasing consumption is also putting pressure on our planetary boundaries. And I actually believe that these technologies will not only solve this problem, but they will also help us get control of our ecosystem so we'll never have this problem again. I'm very hopeful. The final singularity is when surveillance becomes ubiquitous, and this is a concern that's been around for many years, where a government or organizations not only know so much about you, but also have the ability to manipulate your decisions to benefit themselves. And we need to separate those powers of control, and I know that there are organizations, companies that are already working on solving this problem. Okay. I'm just going to close now and say that, and that you all know this, which is it's not good enough anymore for organizations just to have a strong profit motive. You have to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to attract talent, you're not going to attract customers. And I believe it's the collective purpose of enterprise that will actually make these futures glorious for us. Nobody knows what the future looks like, but it's within our gift to create that future. It's within your gift to hold yourselves accountable, hold your leadership accountable, hold your clients, your customers accountable. And I believe that it's a collective purpose of enterprise that will make these glorious futures. My purpose is to try to create a world where everybody is free to live beyond themselves. I genuinely believe it's possible to create a world of abundance, freeing everybody up from economic constraints so that they can figure out how to contribute to humanity. And I want to work with as many people as possible to make that a reality. So on that note, I will stop and open to questions. Is that right? Thank you for listening.